Hello, it is Friday, the 4th of September, and I finished chapter 6 of Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth, written by Stuart Holroyd. I have been reading this book and a previous book called The Only Planet of Choice, referring to Earth, and that was published 1993. This one was published 1977, so it's in fact the earlier book, which describes the journey of these three interesting people: an aristocrat, an English aristocrat, Sir John, and Phyllis Schlemmer, and Andrija Puharich, Sir John Whitmore. Anyway, chapter 6 finished. Very short chapter 4, fourth part, because it was a lovely meditation and prayer, really, by Tom for humanity, and it stood by itself, so it was very nice. And today I'm starting chapter 7, entitled Revelations. "We were wondering when you would ask," Tom said, when Andrija asked if there was any connection between the extraterrestrial civilizations and the legend of Atlantis. This was in November 1974, before the trip to the Middle East. There were two other occasions, largely devoted to ancient history and Atlantis, during the stay in Israel, at which I have deferred writing about until now, in order to bring all the material together in one place. Atlantis, Tom explained in reply to Andrija's question, was a civilization originated by a migrant group from Axel. It had flourished for thousands of years and had come to a sudden cataclysmic end about 11,000 years BC. It had stretched from Greece to the Americas. The name Atlantis was, in fact, a corruption, and it should be known as the Altean civilization, for its people were of the civilization of Altea. Andrija asked, "Could you give us a glimpse of the level of civilization attained by the Alteans? What was their outstanding achievement?" Tom: "In the field of what you call medicine, they were far superior to what you are at this time. Also, your knowledge of electronics is primitive compared to their knowledge, and they knew how to use the mind to move objects and to move themselves. If it was not that below their waist they were always in trouble, it would have been a fine civilization." Andrija asked, "Was their medicine not able to help them with that part of their problem?" Tom said, "They enjoyed it. We, as we have told you before, have no objection to enjoyment except when it becomes the consuming. Instead of using the great medical knowledge that they had to improve their minds, they used it to improve their sex organs. Altean surgery," he explained, "was capable of effecting transplants of all the vital organs of the body, even the brains, and those organs that were transplanted were far superior to those that had existed in the physical body. The life expectancy of an Altean who had the best medical care could run into thousands of years." The three had been on Earth at the time of the Altean civilization, though they had not been together. The doctor was in the area we now call Crete in Greece. Sir John was on a land off the coast of present-day South America, and the being Phyllis was near her present home, Florida, but in a place now submerged. They had all three functioned as teachers, and as they had not been physically born but had come to Earth on a mission, they had not had the same emotions as physical beings. They had underestimated the human desire and greed upon which the opposition would work. The Altean civilization eventually became predominantly degenerate. Andrija asked, "Was the submergence of Atlantis an act of God, or was it..." Tom said, "We were angry. It was perhaps our ignorance in not understanding the density of the planet Earth. We are more compassionate now. At the time of the great anger," he further explained, "there were some peripheral colonies that were not destroyed. But also there were on the main island masses that were submerged, some individuals that were not of the nature of the majority, but they had been destroyed with the rest. They had understood the necessity for the act, and when these souls had incarnated again, they had chosen to come in different physical form. There were some of these reincarnated Altian souls on the planet Earth now, today. We are not sure that in the future their appearance in the manner in which they have appeared will benefit their soul growth, Tom said, but it was their choice, and with their understanding of the physical nature of their past experience, they decided that perhaps in this form they could be of service in a proper way. And they were incarnated as dolphins. Thus was first introduced a subject that was later to be elaborated upon and to lead to some interesting fieldwork. Andrija did not pursue the subject of dolphins' intelligence at this stage, however, but followed up on the subject of the relations between the civilization of Atlantis and that of other ancient civilizations. He asked, according to the Platonic legend, the desirable elements of Altian or Altan civilization were brought to Egypt. Is this true? Tom: yes. After the destruction, you were each involved with the early civilizations of Egypt, Ur, and China. Referring to the legend that the culture of Ur or Summer was founded by the god Or, and to a well-known picture of the god, Andrija asked why the founder of the civilization of Ur had appeared in the form of a fish. Tom said categorically, "It was not. It was a ram." Then why did it come out of the sea according to the legend? Tom: that is not all of the legend. It was first as a bull, it was then as a ram, and finally, as recorded, it was a fish. It was in truth a dolphin, and it was a merging of others with those on this planet. Andrija asked, was it a true biological merging or just for the occasion? And Tom explained that, as in Aksu, it had been a merging of the genes of beings from higher physical civilizations with those of the people of this planet, in order to strengthen and upgrade the species. Andrija asked, how much knowledge from Atlantis was given to the early Egyptians? Tom said, the knowledge of medicine, with the exception of what would be done with the sex organs, was given to them. But you must understand that the primitive people in the land that you call Egypt were a very fearful people. Because of their primitiveness, they were also of such a nature that the genetic memory of the mind recalled the destruction, and therefore they built upon their structure a great worship. While they were talking about Egypt, John took the opportunity to put in a question. I'm very interested in the Great Pyramid and its meaning. Could you say something about that? Which elicited a reproach that, considering the range of Andrija's questioning, seemed rather unfair. Tom: your curiosity and your anxiety at times makes us itch. You cannot stay on one program. John: well, I assume that the Great Pyramid had something... But he was interrupted. When the day arrives, when there is an understanding upon the planet Earth, and when those of other civilizations arrive to help the planet, that will be the day when the secret that you ask is given. Undaunted by the rebuff John had received, Andrija now changed the subject. When we now know that there are different peoples and groups upon the planet, we know that the Israelites are the special project of Hoover, and so on. Can you tell us where the Nordic people fit in? They came from the civilization of Ashand. And is there any particular significance in the fact that Uri Geller and his work are most readily accepted in the Scandinavian countries? Tom: they are in that knowledge the most evolved, because of the creativity of the civilization of Ashand, and they have a core of understanding. It is unfortunate, though, that they have become so material. Tom declined to answer a similar question about the background of the Arab races until we are in the box. But when John asked about the blacks, he came up with an interesting statement. They were the originals on this planet. They were not seeded. They were the souls that evolved here from what you would call the elementals. Briefly summarizing the history of Earth civilization, Tom said that time, 22,400 years BC, the time of the foundation of Aksu, was the beginning of the rising of civilizations and populations. You understand that there was a collapse of the civilization of Aksu. Then there was of course the collapse of what you call Atlantis. And then there was the collapse of... And if you continue, there has been the collapse of many other civilizations. And have you now discovered why? Andrija answered, well, from all you have told us, we understand that it has always collapsed when the desired life has overcome the higher evolutionary development of the soul. Tom said, that is in part true. And he went on to explain that the other part of the truth was that the people in Israel had failed to understand and to fulfill their historical mission. Let us now compare this Earth history material with some of the findings and conjectures of scholars. The evolutionary theory of the origins of Homo sapiens and of Earth civilizations has in recent years suffered from some setbacks. Though paleontologists have found evidence of the existence of anthropoid species going back over 1 million years, it is generally acknowledged today that this could never have evolved into human beings, and that true man appeared on Earth about 35,000 years ago. As one writer on the subject has put it, Homo sapiens appears, suddenly, out of the blue, complete, intelligent, with clothing, weapons, fire, with a curious mythology that owes nothing to an animal ancestor, and with the ability that at the beginning is at least equal to that of today. There is no consensus among historians and anthropologists as to where that Joseph Campbell was called the nuclear folk first appeared. Mid-Europe, the Middle East and Central Asia have all been suggested as locations. The latter would of course coincide with Tom's information, for the Tarim Basin is in the Xinjiang province of western China, and in fact some interesting material has recently come to light which not only seems to bear this out, but also supports the theory of extraterrestrial intervention. In 1965, a Chinese archaeologist published the results of a 25-year study of some strange stone discs found in the caves in the Bayan Karaula Mountains on the borders of Tibet and western China. The discs belonged to the Ham and Dropper tribesmen who still live in these caves and who have puzzled anthropologists, for they seem unrelated to any other ethnic group, being a frail built and little over 4 feet in height. Eventually the key to deciphering the hieroglyphics on the stone disc was discovered, and one of them read, "The droppers came down from the clouds and our men, women and children hid in the caves 10 times before sunrise. When at last they understood the sign language of the droppers, they realized that the newcomers had peaceful intentions. The Chinese archaeologists speculated that these discs and the present occupants of the caves were connected with the ancient Chinese legends which speaks of small yellow-skinned men who came from down from the clouds. The Chinese prehistory banned publications of these discoveries and theories for many years, but when he finally did publish them, a Russian writer, Yakhadelev Zaitsev, reported the work in an article entitled Visitors from Outer Space in the magazine Sputnik in 1967. I'm indebted to a book, Uninvited Visitors, by an American writer, I.T. Sanderson, for this information, which of course is particularly interesting in the light of what Tom has repeatedly said about the origins of civilization on Earth. Now, as regards Atlantis, all the theories about the nature, location and dating of this pre-Diluvian civilization are highly speculative, but Tom's dating corresponds with the general view that a cataclysmic event, the origin of worldwide flood legends, took place between 10,000 and 12,000 years BC. In Plato's Critias, there is a passage about the reason for the destruction of the Atlantean civilization, which Tom's account corresponds with, and which also suggests that the people of Atlantis were a hybrid species. Tom, when the portion of divinity within them was becoming weak and faint, through being oftentimes blended with a large measure of morality, and the human temper was becoming dominant, Zeus, the god of gods, desired to inflict punishment upon them. The punishment, according to Plato's and Tom's version of the story, was inflicted overnight and resulted in the submergence of the civilization of Atlantis. It is interesting to note in passing that the trio later learned that Zeus, Althea and Atlas were synonymous. With regard to Sumer and Egypt, many historians have puzzled over the sudden appearance of high civilizations in these regions about the middle of the 4th millennium BC, and some have speculated that such a substantial body of knowledge must have been taught to the Sumerians rather than developed by them. The view is supported by a passage by the Chaldean historian Berosus, a contemporary of Alexander the Great, who reported a tradition already ancient in his day that there appeared, coming out of the sea where it touches Babylonia, an intelligent creature that man called Oannes, who had the face and the limbs of a man and who used human speech, but was covered with what appeared to be the skin of a great fish. The entire day this strange being, without taking any human nourishment, would pass in discussion, teaching men written language, the scientists and the science and the principle of arts and crafts, including city and temple construction, land survey and measurement, agriculture, and those arts which beauty, life, and constitute culture. But each night, beginning at sundown, this marvelous being would return to the sea and spend the night far beyond the shore. Finally, he wrote a book on the origin of things and the principles of government, which he left with men before his departure. The records add that during later reigns of the Preluvian kings or the other appearances of similar beings were witnessed. This was the origin of the legend referred to by Andrija, that the founder of Ur appeared in the form of a fish. Tom's statement that it was first as a bull, it was then as a ram, is difficult to verify, though the symbology is consistent with what we know of the period. When Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the royal tombs of Ur, he found artifacts which associated the bull with the moon and the ram with the sun. All this is fairly recondite knowledge, and the agreement of Tom's account with these traditions again raises the questions whether the communications are derivative or corroborative. Of the trio, Andrija is the person most likely to be familiar with the sources, and as he asked most of the question, it is possible to regard the communications on the normal paranormal hypothesis as a dialogue he is conducting with his own unconscious, using Phyllis' telepathic receptivity as a feedback channel. Alternatively, it might be surmised that Phyllis in trance can exercise an extraordinary clairvoyant ability to pick up information from remote sources. While we are on the subject of recondite knowledge, I should like to bring up one more point. In the course of a discussion in which John was trying to get a clear distinction between the supreme god, minor gods, and superior beings, Tom said, "We in truth are aeons." And in earlier communication he had suggested that all their people connected with their work might be collectively known as messengers of the aeons. Now, the term aeon, meaning an eternity, is quite commonly used, but its use in the sense of a being beyond space and time is only to be found in certain rare texts of the Gnostic philosophers. Moreover, there are other aspects of the philosophy of the communications, which I shall discuss in the final chapter, that have much in common with the esoteric philosophy of the Gnostics. 1974. After spending the festive season separately with friends and family, Phyllis, John and Andrija reassembled at Ossinin at the beginning of January 1975. The 2 months they spent there before returning to Israel were not externally eventful, though they were not lacking in drama at the interpersonal level. Communications were held every 3 days, and familiar subjects were elaborated and some new ones introduced. The reason communications were not coming more frequent was that the energy they employed was required for the main work project of this period, the TV and radio override. To contribute energy to this project, they all three, on Tom's instruction, spent a period each day at separate times undergoing treatment on Andrija's electronic equipment. This meant that Andrija spent 6 hours and sometimes more daily in the Faraday cage, for the treatments took place in the cage, and he was always present to monitor the program of the other two. Phyllis said, "It was like Chinese torture," she's recalling the sessions. Describing the mechanics, John told me, "You have a headset with tube heads on either side, which are silver-plated and which make contact behind the ear, and just below the temple on either side of the head. What happens is that a radio frequency is passed across the head between these electrodes, with the combinations and the directions being continually varied. What you hear is a tone going up and down a scale, starting beneath the audio range, then going above it, and finally coming down again. Each note takes about 1.5 seconds, and each program lasts 7 minutes, after which the machine switches automatically to the next one. Andrija sits and monitors the power, because if you get too much power you get a burning sensation. After a session I had to keep away from everyone and go and lie down for an hour, because one was oversensitized, and if anything harsh or jarring impinged on the nervous system, its effect was tremendously magnified." Tom gave this explanation in a communication held on the 5th of January 1975 regarding the use of the equipment. "When we program for the communications transmission on your equipment, which is our equipment, it takes a great deal of energy from you, the being, and Sir John. At that time we are in essence passing through the one that is on the equipment, a magnetic force field, which is of a different vibration than exists within your planet Earth. Then we in turn use electric impulses to pull this force field out into the ether. The being is the battery. You are the negative and positive poles of a magnet. At the time you are on the equipment, your physical body comes to a standstill, as it has never come before, and through each treatment the physical body becomes more refined, though not in the sense of your earthly refinement, but in the sense that we might then work with it easier. This places additional stress on the three of you. When you are in your box and on your equipment, there is within your organs a drop in temperature." "Yes," Andrija said. "Recently Phyllis reported an unusual phenomenon. During treatment she experienced a sensation of extreme cold, first on the right temple and then through the head. Would I be right in assuming that this process of cooling down to absolute zero is a way of relieving the brain of the density of the earth?" "Yes," Tom answered. "But remember that the brain does not feel. It is in the entering into the brain that the sensation comes into play." The sessions on the equipment were supposed to accomplish 2 things. First, the electrical energy passed across the brain was used to make bioengineering modification in it. And second, an energy output which could be channeled, stored and used for the communications interruption work was allegedly created by the process. However, Altia's technology was apparently not yet equal to the task of creating and transmitting a television overlay. The entire painful experiment, which consisted of Phyllis undergoing 28 treatments and John and Andrija 32 each, did not produce a convincing technological demonstration of the reality of their communications. Andrija thought it had happened. In fact, when during her later session Phyllis began to hear a quite distinct sound which was not a part of the program. She told me. Andrija got very excited about this and came up with more and more equipment to add to his head to monitor this sound. It was a sound that completely overlay his program. John said he heard it too on one or two occasions, but it proved to be too elusive for Andrija to record or to convert, as he attempted into visual signals on a TV screen. It is not the science, the technology, or the predictions contained in the communications of this period that make them interesting, but rather the quality of some of the teachings they contain, and the consistent development and consolidation of some of the major themes. The series began on the 3rd of January 1975 with a talk by Tom on the subject of doubt and belief, which they all found very pertinent after having had 3 weeks to think over the events of the past months. "You have doubted yourself, Doctor," Tom began. "You have doubted your ability, and you have doubted that within you and within the three of you, you have the power to accomplish all that we ask. We wish you from this moment to remove your doubts. When we inform you that you three have the power and the love and the strength to prevent chaos, tragedy, and loss of life on your planet, we mean this with all that we are, and we ask you to remove your doubts." Andrija said, "Thank you for that strong reassurance. John and I do live with doubt and questions based on the fact that we cannot see the results of our work, for example when we were in Israel last month." Tom: "We understand that, and there will come a time when that problem will be removed. But may we ask you to hold in your heart the faith that you have in knowing that this universe is not operated by chance or simply by what many people on the planet call nature. You are aware of and do not doubt this, so may we ask you to remove the doubt that you have within you the energies to remove the doubt that you have within you the energies to do what we ask. Do you understand of what we speak?" "Yes, we understand," Andrija said, "and I think it is a very relevant lesson for both of us, and—" Tom: "Can you see God?" "I cannot know." "Sir John, do you believe that there is a God?" "Yes, I do." "Then, if you can believe that, why can you not believe that you have the ability and the energy and the power? For remember, this ability and energy and power comes from the love and the desire within you. And when I say desire, I mean the desire to help, which is different from the desire which seeks to control." Andrija asked how the existence of doubt in them had affected the work, and in explanation Tom used the analogy of a cable consisting of millions of copper wires. If some of the wires were broken, he said, it would not break the cable, but the cable would not be perfect and communications going through it would be affected. "You have doubts," he concluded, "because in your explanations to yourselves and to each other you cannot comprehend the nature of who you are. Yes, Sir John?" The inquiry must have been prompted by an act of mind-reading, before John did have a point to make. He said, "One of my main difficulties is our acute awareness of our inadequacies on a physical level." Tom said, "Sir John, you are not so inadequate as you would like to believe. To believe that you are inadequate may be used at times as an excuse," Tom said shrewdly. Andrija suggested that it would help their understanding if Tom could give them a specific example of an occasion when their doubts had adversely affected the outcome of some project. But Tom explained that hadn't happened. Projects had been accomplished in spite of their doubts. Had he not said that the cable with the defective wires would not break, but it would be weakened? He referred to the incident of their last day in Israel, when their car had been immobilized near Yavane for an hour. "You prevented an explosion which, if it had taken place, the three of you would not be in your physical. You would have been returned to us. We cannot prove that to you, but must we have an explosion to prove to you what we say. You have come here with complete faith. That is your mission, as it has been in many of your existences. But sometimes we peer at you and we say, the three of them have forgotten who they are, and they are trapped in the physical and the thinking of the physical, because in the physical it is necessary to see an object or to hold an object in order to believe. But you, Doctor, above all, should understand, for what you have accomplished in your years could not be seen before. Parts of the secret knowledge that you have held within you for many years have now been proven to this physical world. Yes, that's very true, Andrija said. 63% of the people in the United States, Tom said, were now aware of the existence of other beings and were beginning to ask, who are they? Yes, and not only that, Andrija said, but they also ask, are they good or evil? Tom said, when they ask that, you must say, they are good and they wish to help. And if they are those who say, but we have seen those of evil, then we would ask you to ask them to look within themselves and to understand that within each physical being there are the elements of good and all the elements of what they call evil. But we do not like that word, evil. Neither do I, Andrija said. John said, I would like to return to the subject of doubt and belief. I understand completely what you say about the effects of doubting, but on the other hand, I think that blind faith can be equally dangerous, and that for us to draw the fine line between the two is difficult. Tom, we do not ask blind faith of you, ever. You must never just accept, and you must at all times ask questions. But if you will review your communications, you will find that many things that we have related to you have already come to pass. Yes, Andrija said, John and I have been reviewing some of the tapes over the past week, and we are quite astounded at how much we have grown over the last few months under your tutelage. Remember that we have grown with you, because when you grow, we grow. That's a difficult one, Andrija said. I mean, the idea that growth potential still exists at your level, the level of the 9, is quite amazing to us. It is, because you are in the physical and we are in the zone called cold, Tom explained. And although and through you, we are growing in understanding of the physical. In some one relates an experience to you, you might believe it, but you will not have had the emotion. And what has happened with us is that because there are 3 of us attached to each of you and we are within your emotions, we are beginning to learn and to understand. That's interesting, Andrija said. We didn't realize that you were getting a refresher course in Earth experience. It is not just Earth, Doctor, it is the physical. The Earth is only one of many physical planets, but it is the densest, which is unfortunate for you, but means that it is the best place for us to learn. Concluding the session, Tom said, we have begun a new time in your land and your universe, and it is time for you to drop and to remove the string that attaches you to the past time in the physical, and to remove also your doubt. We ask this of you, and we know that it is much, and we know that it is difficult for you to prove what you say to those around you. But it is not necessary, for the proof will come in time. In this world in which you exist, they use a term, happy of your new year. We wish to say to you, happy of your new universe. Right, I think I'll finish this chapter here. Happy of your new universe. This was 1975, and that was the beginning of 1975. And it is chapter 7 called Revelations, and I shall make a part 2 out of this so that they're not too long. I hope you enjoyed that. Prelude to the Blending Environment.